All right, we're recording. All right, so welcome everyone. If you missed last week's session, again, my name is Haley Hardenbrook. I'm the Assistant Director in the International Admissions Office here at ODU. And today's Crown Countdown series is about the visa process. I wanted to do this early because I know you have a lot of questions about it. So we are here to help you with any questions that you have today. Again, introduce yourself in the chat if you're just joining us now and put questions for me in the Q&A, and I'll be sure that we get to all of your questions before the end of today's session. Okay, so before we get started, I did want to do a poll just to see where everyone is in the visa process. So let me do that right now. This will help me understand where you are, maybe where we need to spend more time today. So you should see on your screen now a poll just pop up. It has two questions. What is your visa type? The options are FJ or other visa type. And just so you know, today we are just focusing on the student visa. So the student visa is the one that is sponsored by the university. It is the one that we sponsor for you, that we help you with this status. So that's what we're focusing on today. If you're coming on another visa type, that's wonderful, but you're not going to be sponsored by the university. So you would have to follow the rules, of that other visa status. You would have your own immigration attorney to help with that. So again, we're just talking about the student visa here today. But if anybody else is here from another visa type joining us, you're welcome to listen in. And the second question in the poll is, what step are you in the visa process? So if you can please submit your answer to these questions so that I know where to focus our time today. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. Okay, so most of you are coming on the F visa, 89%, and 11% are coming on the J, which there is a J student visa type as well, but you only qualify it in certain conditions. Okay, about a quarter of you still need your visa document from us. About a quarter of you have your visa document, but you haven't actually started the process yet. Okay, some of you have scheduled your visa interview but haven't yet attended it. And 11% of you have attended the visa interview and are waiting to receive the visa. All right, and nobody here has their visa. All right, already in the US. Okay, good. That's helpful. Okay. So these are the steps of the visa process in case you're at the very beginning and you're unclear on what they are. The first step is to obtain funding. You have to show us funding before we can do anything. And then you request the visa document from our office. It's called the I-20 if you're coming on the F student visa, or the DS-2019 if you're coming on the J student visa. Once we issue you that visa document, you have to pay your SEVIS fee, complete your visa application, actually go to your visa interview, and then wait for processing. And we're going to go in depth into each one of these. Again, as you have questions, please put them into the Q&A. Okay, so the first step is to obtain funding. And I know that this is a hard one for a lot of people. Unfortunately, U.S. immigration requires that we see your proof of funding before we can issue the visa document. So this is a rule for all U.S. schools. So no matter which school you would go to, you have to do the same process. U.S. immigration requires it. It is a law. So most students will show, the most common sources of funding that we see are personal savings or maybe family savings. Some students do take out loans. That's also very common in the United States for US students. Many, especially graduate students, will get assistantships from their department, which is like a working scholarship where you're helping a professor maybe with research or teaching a class in return for paying for your tuition. We do also have some undergraduate assistantships, but those are usually not made available until after you're already on campus, and then you might see them advertised. So if you're an undergraduate student, you might be able to get one for your second year, but usually not your first year. There are some scholarships also available within the department. They have their own scholarships. So it's always a good idea just to ask your department, what sources of funding do you have? That's always a good place to start if you're not sure where else to go, okay? There are also many external scholarships, just meaning external to the university. You may have heard of Fulbright, but there's a lot of smaller ones out there too, that maybe it's only $1,000 scholarship or a $2,000 scholarship, but those add up. And so I recommend finding those, applying for those. I'm going to give you a list of places where you can find external scholarships, okay? But that's where you can submit applications for scholarships if you're not able to get any funding from the university. Some students, depending on what country you're coming from, some countries have a scholarship to study abroad. Maybe your education, your Ministry of Education might have something like that. So it's worth looking into. And then many students, especially if you're coming here for a graduate degree and you're already working in your home country, if you speak to your employer, sometimes they will give you a scholarship to come get your graduate degree as long as you agree to return and work for them for, 1 or 2 or 3 years. So it's worth having a conversation with your employer if you're currently employed to see if they would give you some kind of scholarship to help you with your graduate studies. So these are the things that you have to show funding for. Again, this is legally required. This is not ODU's rule. It's not our rule. It's immigration telling us that we have to do this. Okay. So you have to show funds not just for your tuition. You have to show funds for health insurance because that's also a required cost. And you have to show funding for living expenses. So how are you going to pay for your apartment? How are you going to buy food? We give you an estimate of how much we think that will cost you to live in the city of Norfolk for 1 year, and that's how much you have to show for that. If you are bringing dependents, you also have to show additional funds for them. So a dependent is defined as a spouse, a legally married spouse, or if you have children under the age of 21, they are allowed to come with you, but you have to show extra money for them. So you have to show the money for this in immediately available liquid funds. So you have to have the money right there already sitting in a bank account. And you have to show them for the first academic year. So for when we give you that living expenses estimate, that's just for one academic year. And an academic year is only 9 months. We don't count the summer months because you're not required to enroll over the summer. So that's 9 months of living expenses. So in your head, even though that's legally all you have to show, remember that you're going to need more than that if your program is more than 9 months, which for most of you it is. You can learn more at this website here. I'll put this link into the chat so you can go see actually what we say our costs and fees are. And then these are just a few questions that we get frequently. Some students ask, can I reduce the amount I have to show because maybe I'm going to live with an uncle or I'm going to live with roommates? And the answer is no, everybody has to show the same amount because you're coming on your own principal visa status, which means you have to be able to take care of yourself financially if something were to happen. So even if you plan to live with roommates or have a family member here you're going to live with, that's great, but you have to show that you could afford to live on your own if you needed to. You can combine multiple sources of funding to meet the requirement. So maybe you're getting a scholarship here, and maybe you're using an uncle's bank account, and then also maybe you have some of your own savings, and you're going to combine all that. That is completely okay. You can use as many sources of funding as you need to get to your total cost. And then again, because they have to be immediately available, liquid funds, they can't be tied up in any way. So you can't show me, hey, I own a house. That's great, but you would have to first sell that house. It goes through a whole process. That money is not just sitting in a bank account. You can't show me proof of income because you don't have that money yet. And once you get paid, you then probably have to pay off, rent or other things with that money. So it doesn't mean you're just going to have all that money available. So proof of income is not acceptable, and neither is investment portfolios. Anything tied up in the market and stocks or bonds is not allowed. Okay. Here are the scholarship databases I was talking about. So these are external to the university. So if you do not get any university funding, I recommend going on these websites. I'm going to put them into the chat for you. And you can search and see what scholarships are out there for international students. Now these scholarships are not monitored by the university, so I can't guarantee what's on these websites. You need to do your own due diligence and research to make sure that you're eligible and that they're legitimate scholarships before you apply. Okay, but if you get an external scholarship, usually you can just tell them I'm going to Old Dominion University and they can transfer the money to our cashier's office here to help pay for your tuition. Whoops, did not mean to click on that. Okay. So I just wanted to speak briefly about the cost of living because I think a lot of times students underestimate how much money they're going to need for living expenses. So sometimes you see the number which I believe right now for the upcoming year, we say what, 13,500? Does that sound right for those of you who have already gotten an I-20? Um, so we say, you need $13,500 to live for one academic year in the city of Norfolk. And you think, well, okay, I'll show that much funding, but I probably won't really need that much because I cook at home a lot and I'm gonna live with a roommate and you think I won't really need it. So you actually don't bring that much money with you when you first arrive. And then you get in trouble. We don't want students who are in financial distress. We did a study about 2 or 3 years ago that found and talked to our current international students, and we found that actually their biggest source of stress was not academic stress. It wasn't your classes. It was financial stress because they were just not prepared for how expensive things were in the US. They thought they were going to be able to live for cheaper and they couldn't. So we don't want this to happen to you. Keep in mind too that upfront expenses might be more than once you're settled in and here for a few months. So you might need more in that first month than you will later on. So make sure you show up with enough money to get settled into your apartment and do the things that you need to do. If you have an assistantship and you're saying, well, I'm just going to wait till I get my first paycheck, you might not get that paycheck until after you've already been working for 1 month. So you still need to bring some money with you so you can pay for those upfront costs, settled into your apartment, buy groceries and food and that sort of thing. We do have a website here that talks about, building a budget. So I recommend you look at that. Um, just want you to make sure you're aware too that there are some things that may work differently in the US than maybe in your home country and what you're used to. So there may be some unexpected expenses. For example, employment taxes, income taxes. So let's say you do have an assistantship and they say you're going to get paid $10,000 a semester in a stipend to help. Um, you're not actually going to get $10,000, okay? Because the US government is going to take some money out for taxes before you get your paycheck. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to be getting that full amount that you think you're going to get. You have to pay something called a security deposit. If you're living off campus, which our next session is about housing. So if you're planning to live off campus, definitely come to that one. But you have to pay what's called a security deposit before you can move in, and that's usually equal to 1 month's rent. So that means up front, you're paying the first month's rent plus your security deposit. So you're basically paying 2 months' rent up front. So that's why you have to have extra money for that first month when you first arrive. Restaurant, if you go out to eat dinner, there's a few other services like getting a haircut, things where they expect that you will give them a tip on top of that service, usually 15 or 20%. So it's more than the stated cost. And then we have sales tax in Virginia. So if you are at the grocery store and you see a bottle of water for $2 and you go up to the cash register with $2, you will not have enough money because you have to then pay sales tax on top of that price. And in Virginia, it's about 12%. So it is quite high. So again, just some things that might work differently here than what you're used to in your home country. Um, Okay, so that's all the information on funding. Once you have your funding, you're going to actually request the I-20 from our office. So you will submit your request through your international student portal. If you have a financial sponsor, maybe a friend or family member who's giving you some money, they will also have to complete something called the affidavit of support. If you don't have to fill this out. If you're just funding yourself or maybe you have an assistantship offer, you don't have to complete this form. So this is only if you have an individual giving you some money to help with your studies, or if you have dependents, we'll just need their information. And then you'll need to upload all your financial documentation and a copy of your passport into the International Student Portal. And then this is what a sample I-20 looks like that you'll get back from us. So once you submit the request, we do usually take 1 to 2 weeks, try to keep it closer to 1 week because we know you all want to get started on the visa process. So we try to do it within 1 week. Issue your I-20. You will get an email when it's ready. It will be available in your portal, your international student portal, and you can download it from there, print it, and sign it. So it will be electronically signed by our office, but you have to actually print off the I-20 and sign it in ink with a real pen. Okay, you cannot electronically sign your I-20 as a student. So make sure you're printing and signing it. And that is your original I-20. There's no other copy. There's no real signed copy by our office. That is your original I-20 that you'll need for your visa interview and travel to the US. Now, if you're already in the US going to school and you're going to be transferring your CVIS record to us, we cannot issue your I-20 until after we have your CVIS record. Okay, because that's what the I-20 is. It's basically a copy of your CVIS record. So until we have it, there's no way for us to issue your I-20. So if you're transferring, just keep that in mind. You'll have to transfer to us to get your I-20. The first thing you should do when you get it is look over it and see if it has any errors. If it does, let us know, okay? Because it's an exact reflection of what is in your CVIS record. It should be correct at all times. So if there's ever something incorrect on your I-20, tell us immediately. All right. I'm going to stop. Before I move on to the next one, are there questions about funding or getting your I-20? Let me see. I don't see anything in the Q&A yet. I just want to be sure that we have enough time to answer any questions. Okay, well, if you think of something, feel free to put it in. And I will keep going. All right. So once you have your I-20, this means that you can actually apply for the student visa now at a U.S. consular embassy. It means that you do have an offer of admission to a U.S. university, and you have shown to us that you have the money to pay for your program. Okay, I do see a question in the chat. So instead of getting the I-20 as a real paper, we're just going to get it online. Correct. So now the original I-20 is the one that our office signs electronically and uploads in your portal. So we're not actually going to print off the I-20. We're not going to actually sign it in ink. That electronic signature is considered the original one. That changed a few years ago. At the start of the COVID pandemic, the US government made that change to make it easier. So we no longer have to mail your I-20s to you. So that is your original I-20. You will not have any issues with it being signed electronically by our office. All of these officers are familiar with this, and every CBP officer at the border. Good question. Okay, so once you have your I-20 or your DS 2019, you will pay the CVIS fee, which you pay online. I do see one more question that came in about funding. Can we show fixed deposits as funding sources? So I know these are very common in some countries that have a fixed deposit. The answer is yes, as long as it's going to mature before the semester starts. Because again, you have to access that money to pay tuition, pay your housing. So if it's in some sort of deposit that won't mature until after the semester starts, it's not usable. But if it will mature before then you can use that. Okay, so you pay the CVIS fee online. I will put this link into the chat for you. Sometimes students ask, maybe you deferred your admission, maybe you were originally admitted for fall 2025, and now you've deferred your admission to fall 2026. If you've already paid your CVIS fee, you don't have to pay it again. So you basically pay a fee on each CVIS record. So you only pay it once per record. Now, if maybe you were a student in the US 2 years ago at a different school and you had a different CVIS record, and we are having to start a new record for you here, then you will have to pay the CVIS fee again. Because again, you pay the fee on each record that you have. So if you're coming on a new record, it's a new CVIS fee. Now, maybe you had a record created, maybe you were admitted to another school originally and you paid the CVIS fee, but you never went to your visa interview, you never entered the United States, you never used that other CVIS record, you can actually request to transfer the fee from that CVIS record to your new CVIS record from ODU. So there's a place on the CVIS fee website where you can request to transfer that fee over to your new record. Okay, if anybody has any questions about this, feel free to email me and I'll help you. But you have to pay the fee for each record that you have. And that's the first thing you should do. And then you should go complete your visa application. So the visa application is called the DS-160. It is the non-immigrant visa because the student visa is considered a non-immigrant visa type. It means that your plan is not to come to the US permanently. You're coming temporarily to be a student, and then your plan is to return home. So this is the application that you fill out. This link will give you information about the application and then a link to the actual application. I will put this in the chat for you here as well. It does ask you on this form, who is your U.S. point of contact and what is your US address. If you don't know anybody else in the United States and you don't have someone you can list as your US point of contact, you're welcome to use our address, or even my name. It should be whoever signed your I-20, you're welcome to use that person's name. And you can find our office's contact information in our email signature line if we've ever emailed you, or just Google it, do an internet search for it. But you're welcome to use us if you need to, and you can use us as your US address. So you do not need to have secured an apartment already before you go to your visa interview. So don't worry if you haven't done that. That's not a requirement. So if you don't know where you're going to be living yet, feel free to also list, our office or some kind of university address for that. And then of course you'll attend your visa interview. So after you fill out the 160, you schedule the visa interview. You need to, when you schedule the visa interview, you have to put in the number of your DS-160. And so that has to, when you show up, the number that's on your DS-160 application has to match what you put in when you scheduled your visa interview. So this is only really an issue for students who are, maybe trying to schedule your visa interview quickly. And so you did it with another school's I-20 because you got the I-20 from them faster, but really you want to go to ODU and now it's a different I-20. So then that's going to cause problems. So you really just need to wait until you know what school you want to go to and you have the I-20 and then schedule your visa interview. Because if any information changes between when you schedule the visa interview and show up to the visa interview, it can cause an issue. It's another reason to not use agents. We'll talk about agents in a minute. If they're scheduling that visa interview for you, sometimes they'll just schedule visa interviews with generic placeholder information and then try to update it later on once they have a student who needs an appointment, and that can cause issues. So I recommend scheduling your own visa interview once you have all the necessary information, once you have your I-20. This link here will take you to the visa wait times. So you can see about how long it might take for you to be able to attend your interview once you schedule it. So I'll put this link in the chat for you. In some cases, you might be able to waive the visa interview. You might not actually have to go in person, like if you've had a previous non-immigrant visa. So again, the best source of information really for the actual visa process is just the U.S. Embassy or consulate that you're going to visit. So I recommend checking on their website just to make sure you're doing the process correctly. See if there's a visa interview waiver process that you might qualify for or anything else. That's always where you're going to find the most updated sources of information. All right, and then once you attend the visa interview, you just have to wait for processing. So this is probably the most frustrating part because this can take several weeks. You might not hear anything until all of a sudden it's approved. So when you walk away from that visa interview that day, you might at first think you're getting a denial. You might get something called a 221G administrative processing refusal, but that's not actually a denial. It just means it's a pause while they are now going to go do some additional research on you, maybe a background check, maybe they're going to be looking at your social media, any public presence that you have online. And then once they do all that and you pass, then they'll issue the approval and the visa. Okay. So do remember that this is something that also started, in the last few years, social media vetting. You are required to list all social media handles that you've had within the last 5 years. Failure to disclose a social media account can be a reason for a visa refusal. You need to make sure also that all of your accounts are set to public so that the visa officer can look at them. If you want to know, what your online presence is, just do an internet search of yourself, or look up your name on a social media account and see what they are looking at. You want to make sure that any information that's publicly available matches what you have put in the DS-160. So like jobs, places you've worked, places you've lived. It needs to seem like it matches, okay? Again, so this might take several weeks for them to do this process. All right, and then they'll issue your visa and they'll tell you to, come get your passport with the visa in it. This link here I'm going to put in the chat has information about how long visas are valid for, how many times you can use a visa, if you might have to pay what's called a reciprocity fee. So I recommend it's broken down by country. So you'll put in the name of your country, you'll select it from the list, and then there's all the different visa types, which is pretty much the whole alphabet. There's an A, a B visa, a C visa. So you look for F visa or J, maybe if you're coming on the J, look for F or J, and then that will show you the information of how many times you can use the visa. So if it's a single entry or a multiple entry, how long it's valid for. Some visas are, depending on what country you're from, maybe only going to be good for 3 months. Some are going to be good for 5 years. And sometimes they give you a choice. Like I know from Argentina, if you can choose like a 1 year visa, which is free, or you can choose a 5 year visa, but then you have to pay a fee of about $200. So again, it just, it'll show you what your options are depending on what visa type you're applying for and what country you're coming from. Um, Keep in mind, some countries, this is new it was announced at the end of 2025. There are unfortunately right now some travel restrictions in place and visa restrictions in place. And so if you are from one of those countries, if you're a citizen of one of those countries, just be aware there might be restrictions. I'm going to give you the link where you can look that information up too. Okay, how much do visas cost? Because a lot of students want to know just how much is it? Because it seems like there's all these fees I'm getting charged. So the first one is the SEVIS fee. That's $350. And then the DS-160 fee, or just sometimes called the visa fee, is a 185. So normally you'll fill out the DS-160 and then it'll tell you to pay this fee. So those might be the only two fees you have to pay unless you are from a country that has a reciprocity fee. Again, visit that webpage, the link I just put in the chat, and I'll give you the link here again in a minute. But again, some countries have a reciprocity fee because maybe your country charges US Americans a fee. So in turn, we charge you guys a fee. So it's usually these are all based on like the other countries, like a reciprocal relationship. And then just keep in mind, however much it's going to cost you to travel to the U.S. Embassy. So maybe it's not in your hometown, or maybe, it's across the country and you're going to have to get in a hotel and stay for a week or two while your visa is being processed, or maybe you're going to have to travel back and forth twice. So just keep that in mind. Okay. I did want to address expedited processing and reapplying in case you're denied because we get asked about this. So this was more common, I admit, before the current president, before the current administration. But I think some embassies might still do it. So some will let you move up an appointment. So if you've already scheduled it, so if you look and there's no appointment availability until after the semester's already started and you're panicking, you say, what do I do? Go ahead and schedule the earliest visa appointment you can. And then you can keep checking availability. If something earlier opens up, you can reschedule it to earlier. And then usually once you're within 60 days of your I-20 start date, so that'll be about mid-June, some consulates, some, I don't know how many now are doing it, but they'll let you expedite it. So it's just requesting to move up your already scheduled appointment. So again, the first step is scheduling it, even if it's a year out, or 6 months away. And then you can try to move it up if a new appointment becomes available, or within 60 days, you can try to request to expedite it because you say, hey, look, based on my I-20 start date, I'm supposed to start a degree program in August and I haven't gotten my appointment yet. And so it is based on your I-20 start date. You do not need an extra letter from the school for this process, okay? You just need your I-20 to prove when your program is going to begin. But every consulate works a little bit differently. Again, I recommend going to their website for the current information. And if they allow expedited processing, they will tell you how to do it. If you are denied a visa, you are allowed to apply again. So there's nothing saying that you can't apply again, but there will be a record that you were denied the first time. And so you might just have to explain like how things are different from the first time you applied. Maybe before you didn't have all the right documentation, or maybe before you're applying for a different school and now you're going to be coming to Old Dominion, or maybe you've changed programs or your funding source is different. Maybe before, it was an uncle and now you've gotten a scholarship or an assistantship. So usually you have to be prepared to explain how it's changed. But it is very possible that you're denied the first time and then get your visa the second time. I have students who that happens for all the time. Okay, they get denied for the first time they apply and then they get it the second time. So don't be afraid that because it's denied the first time, you're never ever going to get a visa. Okay, it does frequently happen for my students that they get it the second time they apply. Okay, a few tips that I wanted to go over with you. In case you weren't aware, on average, the visa interview is only 2 or 3 minutes. They are extremely short. So you are not going to have time to go into very much detail with the visa officer. Okay. They are having to make basically a snap decision whether they trust you and they think you're a valid student. So you don't need to have a whole speech prepared. Okay. Usually the first question they're going to ask you is, why do you want to go to Old Dominion University? Out of all the colleges and universities in the world. And it doesn't have to be, again, a super long or detailed answer. It might just be, I want to be a chemist, and I know Old Dominion has a really good chemistry program. Or maybe I had a friend who went to Old Dominion and always said really good things, and I got into this program that is related to my career path. It can be like a 1 sentence or 2 sentence answer, but just have something prepared because that usually is the first question they ask. Remember that you're applying for the student visa, so that means your primary purpose for coming to the United States is to study and be a student. So you shouldn't really say, well, I'm trying to work in the United States, or I know that they have really good internship connections or connections to employers at Old Dominion. So it should, focus on your study plan, that you're coming to be a student, and be prepared to explain how this degree at ODU is going to help you further your career goals back home. Again, this is a non-immigrant visa, so you should be prepared to return to your home country and work in your home country. So explain how this relates to career opportunities in your home country, not career opportunities in the United States. You should take documentation with you, especially your admission letter, and if you've received a scholarship or an assistantship, or just any whatever funding you showed to us to get your I-20, you should take that same funding. So if it's personal bank account or a family member's bank account, take that. If you're a PhD student, you might also want to have drafted up like your research plan or your study plan. Maybe work on this with your program director, your advisor. Sometimes they'll ask for that. Sometimes they'll put you in administrative processing after the interview and wait until you get that to them. So if that takes you 2 weeks to get after your visa interview, that's how long you're going to be waiting for your visa. So sometimes it's helpful to go ahead and have that before you attend your visa interview. And then you may have also heard this term proof of ties to your home country. Again, because the student visa is a non-immigrant visa and you're expected to return to your home country when you finish, sometimes they want to see, that you have ties to your home country, and so they're not worried you're just trying to come to the US permanently. So ties to your home country might be things like, I have a bank account here in my country. I'm not going to leave that money behind, or I have family members here. Or maybe I own a piece of property here, or maybe I'm coming back to work a job. Again, if you're a graduate student, you have an employer, especially if they're going to give you some kind of like scholarship and you have a letter that says they're going to give me some money in return for going back and working for them when I graduate. That is great for visa interviews because it proves you're definitely going back to work for this employer. So anything you can think of that proving that you have ties to your home country. Now, the visa officer may not look at any of this, again, because a visa interview is only 2 or 3 minutes long, but you should have it with you in case they ask, so you can just pop it out and show it to them. Again, you sort of want to be prepared, have an idea of what kinds of questions you might be asked, but you don't want to have a practice speech. If it sounds like you've just rehearsed a speech and you're not actually listening to the question you're asking, you're just saying this practice speech that you've had in your head, that can cause them pause. That they might assume, okay, maybe the student actually doesn't speak English that well, so they didn't really understand my question, or maybe they've heard that this is the right answer to say, and so it's not really the truth. They're just spitting back to me a practice answer that someone told them to say, and this isn't the truth. So they can go by gut instinct. If they think something's off, they can deny you. They do not need a reason to deny you. They just have a gut instinct. So again, you just want to, actually listen to the question that's being asked and respond to that, okay, instead of having like a rehearsed speech that you say. But again, try to keep your answers brief. You don't need to go into more detail. Don't answer questions that they didn't actually ask, if that makes sense. You don't want to volunteer additional information that they have not asked, okay? Okay, so this just came out, I think, last week. This is a new thing that they are asking students now at the visa interview. They will ask you two questions about do you have fear of persecution in your home country? You know, are you afraid that if you stay here or come back here that you'll be persecuted? Um, so be prepared to answer those questions. You should answer them honestly. Um, but we've been heard that if you say yes, then you'll be denied the visa. So just again, but you should answer that honestly, but just be prepared to answer those questions because we've heard you will be asked two questions about this. And I think it's new as of last week or 2 weeks ago. Your passport. So that should be valid 6 months after your I-20 start date. Okay. If it's going to expire 2 months after the I-20 start date or 3 months, they're not going to issue your visa. So you may need to renew your passport before you actually start the visa process if you haven't done so already. You don't need it to get the I-20 from our office. Your passport can actually be expired when you submit it to our office for the I-20 because we just need it to see the way that your name is written. So it's okay if it's expired, but you will need to renew it before you start the visa process. Look at those visa validity timelines that I sent you to also make sure you're not starting too early. Again, because from some countries, your visa is only going to be valid for 3 months. So if you get it 3 months before you actually show up on campus, it was all for nothing, and you just have to do the visa process all over again and get a new visa, okay? So especially if you think you might defer your admission to a later semester, make sure you know how long your visa is good for. Okay, a few more tips. You can do practice interviews with Education USA. If you haven't heard of them, they are a great resource. They are a free resource. They help students not only apply to schools, but also help you know what to expect for the visa process. Most Education USA offices are actually in the US Embassy. So they're very close with the visa officers. So they know exactly what that process looks like. And they will do practice. They can do practice interviews with you, so that you can be used to answering questions or knowing what to expect. They can also help you with body language, so things you might not be aware of. If your legs are crossed and you're turned away and you're looking over here and you're not looking at the person who's asking you the questions, that can come off as suspicious. Maybe it seems like you're nervous about something, and so the visa officer might assume you're trying to hide something. And this might be something you're not aware of. So practice interviews are really good because they can also say, hey, your body language, make sure you look relaxed and, point out things to you that you haven't even thought about. I mentioned this earlier, but education agents, which, it's great. It's if you use an agent to apply, that's great. And they can also give you tips on the visa interview and the process, but I wouldn't let them schedule the visa interview for you. That is something that you should be doing as the applicant. You should be doing that yourself. They do not have any special access to visa appointments. They have to do the same thing that you do. So please don't pay an agent extra money to obtain you a visa appointment, okay? Because it's the exact same process that you have to do. You, you have to answer a lot of detailed questions when you schedule this visa interview and fill out this DS-160. And if they don't know the answer, or they put in something wrong, or they're just booking up appointments for students, but they don't actually have the specific student in mind yet, and they put in generic information, and anything has to be updated before you show up for your visa interview, that can cause your visa interview to be canceled. So then it was all for nothing, and you got to do the process all over again and wait all over again. So please just schedule your own visa interview, okay? Again, the final tip is just show you're an authentic student. That's, as long as you really are coming to ODU to go to school and be a student, you don't have anything to worry about. Okay. So I know it's easy for me to say, don't be nervous, but try, if you really are coming to be a student and you don't have some hidden agenda, then you should be fine. So just answer the questions honestly. You know, they're just trying to get a gut instinct from you in 2 or 3 minutes. Does this seem like this is really a student? Um, And the final tip is never lie. Even if you think this might help me and maybe I should hide this fact because this might work against me, it's worse if you try to hide it and then they find out about it later on. Okay. So you should never, ever, ever lie because if they find out, it's like an automatic visa denial. Okay. This website here has more tips on just, things to keep in mind for the visa interview, advice, tips, what to expect. So I'll put this link in the chat. This organization, NAFSA, is a great organization that has some good advice for students. Here are some more resources for you here. So these are actually from the US government. I'm also going to put all of these links in the chat. But they have a web page on on student visas. So start there. Definitely read that. Information on the student visas. CBP stands for Custom and Border Patrol or Protection. And those are the people actually at the airport or at the border who are going to let you into the country. So they have their own websites and they have reminders here about what it might be like when you come to the border. Again, we also have a Crown countdown session on traveling and the port of entry. So we'll talk more about CBP and Border Patrol at that session. Education USA, this is the office I mentioned that will help you, practice visa interviews. So go to their website to find the closest advising center to you. Sometimes they offer things virtually, so you don't actually have to go in person to their center. Here's the website for the visa reciprocity fees and validity periods. Make sure you're looking at that. And then just the link to find your US consulate or embassy that you will be visiting for the visa interview. You should definitely look at their website, see what information they have. Because again, some consulates do things slightly different or have different processes. So make sure you're seeing what's the right one for the consulate that you're going to be visiting. Okay. ODU, we have some of our own resources. So I'll put these in the chat. These are just 2 web pages we have on applying for the student visa. NAFSA, this is that organization I just mentioned. They're a professional organization that is for people like myself who issue the visa documents and actually advise international students. So they have some good resources. If you think you are from one of those countries that has the travel ban, they have a great web page here that sort of breaks it down so it makes it much easier to understand. If I'm from this country, what does this mean for me? So they make it easy. It's a very long link, so that's why I just did this QR code. But I will put the entire link in the chat here. Again, it's a very long link, which is why on the slide I just have it as a QR code. But if you think you might be subject to that, I would recommend looking at their webpage. Okay, just a reminder, what other resources we have for you. So the admitted student guides, you can be looking at this to figure out what next steps should I be taking, how do I create my Midas ID and access my ODU email and all those things. The International Admitted Student Guide is also where we are going to be posting the recording to this after today. So you can look there if you need to go back and watch anything. And then, all right, I have your Crown countdown tip of the week. Are you guys ready for this? These pictures may have given it away. But don't walk on the seal. So this seal, it's like a metal, stamp, which is in the middle of the Kaufman Mall. It's actually this dot right in the middle of the field here. That's what this is. But there's a tradition that if you walk on it before you graduate, you won't actually ever graduate. So don't walk on it the whole time that you're a student here. You'll see students who would start walking all the way around it because they want to avoid stepping on it. If you step on it, the myth is you won't graduate. So this picture here are students who have just, they're graduating finally, so now they're allowed to step on the seal. So that's like a fun sort of tradition we have here. So that is our tip of the week. All right, if you want to be, last week we had a student that we featured who is going to be arriving. If you want to be featured in one of these, just, a little bit of information about who you are and, if you're looking for like a roommate or you want to connect with students, you want to provide like your email or contact, this is a great way to be featured. So fill out this form if you want to be featured in a webinar. All right, and now questions. Please tell me what questions you have. Feel free to put them in the Q&A. Um, I'll try to see if I've missed any in the chat. I'll go back and look. You're also welcome to unmute yourself if that's easier. Or if anyone is actually, I don't think anyone's been, I think I'm trying to remember, a few people I think had attended the visa interview and were just waiting for processing. So if you are one of those and you actually have been to your visa interview and you feel like sharing what that process was like for the others, feel free to unmute yourself. Okay, so I see a question about if you've completed your master's program, another school, can you use the same CVIS number? So no, if you've previously done a degree in the US and that record has been completed, which means it's been closed, you've already left the US, you've gone home, that means your record has been completed. No, you can't open up an old record. So once it's closed and completed, you can't reopen it. So we would just start a new record for you with a new I-20 connected to a new CVIS ID, so you would have to pay that CVIS fee again, and it would be a new CVIS ID. Um, I paid my CVIS fee in 2024. It expired last July. I'm not yet in the States. So I don't think you should have to pay it again, because if that same CVIS record is still the one that you're going to be using to come in on. So it's still active. I don't think it will expire. So you should not have to pay that CVIS fee again if it's still the same record. You're going to be using that to enter. Okay, great. It's active. Yeah. Then you shouldn't have to pay it again because you've already paid it and the record was never closed. Lydia, I see your question about what is it possible to ask anything regarding politics. So I don't think they'll ask you like what is your political affiliation or what do you think about the US president? They usually don't get to anything like that in the visa interview. However, they might when they are doing that social media review after the visa interview, if they see something like maybe you attended a protest, maybe like a No Kings protest, or they see that you're very politically active and you've said something bad about the current US president, that could be a reason for a visa denial. So again, just be careful about what you put on there on the internet and on social media. If they think that you are hostile to the current administration, um, that could be a reason for visa denial, although they probably won't ask you that during the visa interview. They'll just look for evidence of it online. So that was a good question. Um, so let's see. Oh, I see Marco. Oh, your visa interview is tomorrow morning. Oh my goodness. Good luck. Please email me and let me know how it goes. Um, it's easy for me to say, of course, because I'm not doing it myself, but just try to be calm about it. Just try to, listen to the questions and answer the questions. And, the more nervous you are, it might seem like you're trying to hide something. And again, they can just go off gut instinct. So try to just be calm about it, be relaxed. Again, as long as you're really just coming to be a student, you shouldn't really have anything to worry about. Um, has anybody already done their visa interview and they want to share their experience? I'm going to go ahead and stop recording, so none of this will show up in the recording later.